This is So let me do a little bit of a recap from last week and just kind of highlight the storyline. We thought about Joshua who had been in Egypt around, say, 20 years. And then when he left God's people, Moses leading them out, they headed towards the promised land. But they didn't go in the promised land, and they ended up wandering around for 40 years because they didn't do as God asked of them and take the land. So his life, Joshua's life, up until now, had been doing a very boring job of making bricks or wandering around getting nowhere. That's quite a life, isn't it? And I likened it to us a little bit when we go through life. And yes, we are the people of God, and yet so often we don't feel that we are really achieving what we think God wants us to achieve. It feels a bit like we're having to do a job that is boring. It feels like we have been wandering around for quite a while without really achieving anything. It may even feel like that you thought you were in the place that the Lord wanted you to be, but it seems that now you're just marching round the wall. Round and round and round. And so here they are, God's people. And they've been given the land. Remember, they actually got in to the land, flowing with milk and honey that God promised to them. But the first place they come to is Jericho. And Jericho is surrounded by a wall. That's not the wall of Jericho. That's actually the wall at the moment that's around Jerusalem. But it kind of is a visual aid to the right place. Sorry? I didn't knock down anything. But you can look at that wall, say, if that was Jericho's wall, which I'm sure it wasn't unlike it. It looks strong, doesn't it? And God's people didn't have that much really to break it down with. You know, they weren't kind of coming from another city where they had lots of armament and so on. They were a wandering people. They have an army, yes, but to take a city with a wall, something like that around it, that's hard. So when Joshua tells the people to walk around the city wall, I wonder what was going on in their mind. I wonder if they started to kind of talk with each other as they were getting ready to walk, or even as they were walking. What's this about? We're walking around the wall. This is the land that God supposedly has given to us, and we're walking around the wall with loads of people inside. A wall that we have no hope of actually knocking down ourselves. Is this it? Is this what we've come to? Just walking round a wall? That's progress. I wonder if you think you're making progress. I said last week that I wanted to look today at this story with some perspective. And you may or may not have seen this before. It kind of just became so clear to me as I was looking at the story 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the first thing on the perspective, there's 2 things I want to look at, is verse 2. Verse 2. And this is God speaking to Joshua And he says, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. God's people go up to this city and they see it's big and it's got this stone wall around it and it has these huge gates that are shut tight. And God's people were not going to be able to just smash it down. No way. And that was never the plan. The people of God had no real power to break the walls and into this city. So, who has the power? Yeah. And verse 2. There is a perspective on this story. Outside of human kind of just, let's turn up at the walls and walk around it. Are you kidding me? God says to Joshua, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. Now that makes a huge difference, or at least it should do. When God says to you, I have delivered this city, this people, this whatever it is you're heading towards, I have delivered it into your hands. It's His plan. And He's going to make sure that His plan works. It's going to happen. It doesn't mean that the people don't do anything, but the people play a very active role in this. But it's God's plan. I've delivered it. Now you're going to play a part in this to make sure this goes through. And we know that they have to do something. And they have to do it 7 times. 7 days. And what they got to do didn't even make much sense. But we'll cover that later. So that's perspective number 1. Many of us kind of know what God's will is for our lives. We kind of think, yeah, you've asked me to do this, Lord, or you've asked me to do that. Perhaps we put it on the back burner. Perhaps we've kind of almost forgotten about it up till recent weeks when I've been starting to talk about it a little bit more. Maybe as a church we kind of think, yeah, I know what God wants us to do, but it seems too big, it seems like a big city walls around there, and we can't do it because we're only a small church, etc., etc. But we've got to remember that God says, I have delivered. It's not about us. It's about Him. And we do His bidding, and if we do His bidding, He delivers. So that's perspective number 1. God is in control. He will make sure what He asks us to do, whatever that is, happens. Perspective number 2. I wonder how many of you have noticed this before. Now the gates of Jericho were... verse 1. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. What's that tell us about all the people inside the city of Jericho?
They were afraid.
They were afraid. They knew the Israelites were coming. They were on lockdown. You know, this is not some fortified city in the sense they feel strong. They're actually feeling afraid inside. No one went out. No one came in. They locked up. No one could move. Because they knew these people were outside. Now, this wasn't a group of people to say, open the gates, come on, we're going out to take them. No, we're going to lock the gates and close off. We're staying inside here. The people of Jericho had heard about these Hebrews. And they were not taking any chances. No one out. No one in. They were very worried that these people who had crossed over the River Jordan were going to come in and cross over into their city. Maybe the Hebrews, God's people, thought Jericho was strong and brave and a huge adversary to face. Remember, 40 years earlier, the spies had looked and seen what was going on there, and they said, "Oh, they're all giants in there. We can't take them." That was their undoing. That was when God said, "Okay, let's go from under for 40 years." It could have been that standing around the city of this wall, they felt somewhat weak. But actually inside the walls were the weak ones. The people inside the walls were the scared ones. And not only does verse 1 tell us that, but we have the words of one of Jericho's own citizens telling us that. I said keep your Bibles open. Flip back a couple of pages to Joshua chapter 2. Good to hear the rustle of paper. Joshua 2 and verse 8. And we have a lady there called Rahab. We won't go into all the story. Don't need to go into all the story at this time. But some of the spies that Joshua sent in met up with Rahab. And it says in verse 8, before the spies lay down for the night, she went up onto the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts sank, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. So here's the truth. When the door seems shut to whatever you believe God is calling you to, whether it's going to see someone or talk with someone or stand up and say something or whatever it is, it does not mean because that door seems shut that it's a lost cause. It could mean that the people that you're trying to talk with, that God wants you to go to, are actually frightened of us as God's people. That's the story. Joshua is told by God to take the people and march around the city 7 times. And that on the last day, on the 7th day, they would have victory. Now, if you read through the story there in Joshua 6, you will notice that what Joshua said to the people was not the whole story. God said to Joshua, go around, take the people 7 times round, and on the 7th day you will get the victory. Joshua doesn't tell them all that. He tells them one day at a time. He just tells them, okay, today we're going to go up and we're going to march around the wall. Once. The outside the wall, not around. And that's the instruction he gave for that day. So, kind of imagine this. Joshua says, okay, everyone in out, come on, we're going to march around the wall. And they go around Jericho. I've been told to walk around Jericho's boundaries. It takes about an hour. I did that. So you imagine all the people all marching around. And they go around for their hour. And then Joshua says, okay, back to camp. Okay. Day 2. Joshua says, okay, everybody up, come on, we're going to form into groups, and we're going to march around Jericho. And off they go, marching around Jericho for about an hour. And they get right the way around, they stop, and it's all, okay, everyone back again. Some of these were fighting men, they were an army. They were used to kind of, going in, all prepared for battle. March around the walls, back again. Day 3. Okay, everybody out, into your groups, now march around the wall. After an hour, okay, back again. That's all they're told, not told anything else, that's what they're told. Can you imagine being in that army of people? What's Joshua about? How are we going to get in there? Just doing an hour's walk around the city. I wonder how you would start to feel. This is the promised land. This is the land that God has given to us. And there are people in the city we know we've got to take. Hey, God, why are you telling us just to go for a march for an hour around the wall? We're supposed to be occupying the land. We've just arrived in this promised land. We're ready to go, and you're just telling us to walk around the wall. And then do it for 6 days. Get up, round the wall once, back to camp. And this story tells us that we need to follow God's instruction day by day and not give up, not stop. Imagine if those men had been marching around the wall on first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and they're going, Joshua, this is killing us. We're not getting anywhere. We're not coming out on the 7th day. Sorry, we're just staying in camp. Don't stop when God tells you to keep going. Never give up. Remember Joshua, 20 years slave, 40 years wandering, and we know the rest of the story that they done. If Joshua had given up at the age of 30 or 40 or 50. Day 7. Did they kick the walls in? Did they fire missiles at it? Did they do anything to raise the wall? What did they do? We're told they got up. Here we go again. We're going to march around the wall. Once? No. No. We're not going to march around the wall once. No, we're going to march around the wall 7 times. Oh, good. That's 7-hour march then. So they go marching around the wall once and twice, 3 times, 1, 6 times, and 7 times. And we're told at that stage they then are told to shout. And the story tells us that the walls collapsed. I had a lovely story told me when I was in Israel. When I went to Masada, which is another story in Israel. And our guide was talking to us about the walls of cities. Now he came up with an answer to what happened on this day. He wasn't taking God out of the situation, but he was just showing what may have happened. It's supposition, I'm not saying it's what happened. But we kind of think, how is this city going to collapse? How are these walls going to come down? Okay, I'll leave that one on. I thought I'd put a picture in. The city walls in those days were by and large kind of like a cavity wall. There was an outer and there was an inner, and then they had floors put in, and there was a kind of a roof, if you will, over the top. So people lived in the city wall, and there would be little windows and so on in the city wall high up around it. And we know this, particularly for Jericho, because of Rahab. Go back to chapter 2. And Rahab lives in the city wall. At the top. Because it talks about going up onto the roof. And little windows out at the sides. And you look at the wall and you think, that's never going to come here. So let's tell the story, purely supposition. I don't know what happened. And I'm certainly not eliminating God out of this, because God knew exactly what was going on and what to do. Without any missile being fired, without any, breaking down a wall physically, it happened. Because God said, okay, go around the wall once on the first day, go around the wall twice on the second, once on the second day, and he knew that all the people inside were terrified. All the people were scared stiff of God's people, of what they were going to do, what was going to happen. We've heard about them. So they go around the third time, they're thinking, what is going on out there? We're on lockdown, remember? And a fourth time, and a fifth time, and a sixth time. And so they've gone through the whole week now, and the people of God have marched around once around their city wall, and they're kind of getting very edgy, getting angry. And on the seventh day they turn up, and they go around again, and they kind of think, okay. And then they go around a second time, and they go around the third time. And by this time, everyone from the city is starting to go up on the top of the wall. Remember? The layers, roof, people would actually go up and climb on them. And now I want you to see what these people of God are doing. And they're going round. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. And as they get to the 7th time, they shout. And then everyone in the city is now looking over the wall, seeing what's going on. There's so much weight on this wall of all the people that the wall collapses. Because it just kind of... And that's not... If it happens, that's not taking anything away from God. God planned that. I just love that story. I just think that's so practical of God, if you like. He knew that was all built. He knew the people. He knew they were scared. And if that's what happened. The bottom line is that after they gave that shout, the walls collapsed. And God's people had to march by faith. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how it was all going to end. They didn't know how even the wall was going to collapse. They were just told each day the month. They had to just trust in God. I wonder, will you do God's work when it doesn't seem to be working? Will you do God's work when it doesn't seem to be working? See, our human nature tells us after a while, I've done this. I've been round the wall 3 times, 4 times. I'm getting tired of it. God doesn't seem to be doing anything. I'm not even sure now that was my calling. I'm kind of having doubts and so on. The devil put in our mind, you don't want to do that anymore. It's not working. Have a sit down now. Don't turn up on the 7th day. How many people die in marching? First day, second day, God has his way. And he does something amazing. And what someone said when I was looking at this passage was, what happens is God's responsibility. Obedience is ours. Okay? If God tells us to march or whatever, that's obedience. What happens, what the result is, it's not down to us. That's God's responsibility. You remember that the Lord told us to go out and make disciples. To go out and tell people about him and that they would come to faith and become Christians. He wouldn't tell us to do that if it was impossible. We need to go out and do what God calls us to go out and take the land for him. And it's not for us to worry about what happens. We just need to do it. Remember, Jericho looked so strong and impenetrable, and they were never going to get in there. And we look at people. In fact, just while I'm talking, put up on your screen, you know your screen, you've got one here. Put up on your screen a couple of people that kind of seem impenetrable. I can't imagine them sitting in church. I can't imagine them worshipping. I can't, that kind of impenetrable, okay? Put up a couple of people on your screen. People who seem resistant to the gospel. Maybe you've tried an awful lot, and maybe you've only tried a couple of times. Maybe you haven't actually tried yet. People you really don't think will open their lives up to the Lord. You've got those people in your head there on the screen. They may seem strong, they may seem like their doors are shut tight. But in many cases, the truth is, they're actually a little frightened of opening up their lives to a Christian, talk about God and so on. Because it's all uncertain to them. And we kind of think they're being strong and there's no way we're going to get through. But if we just do as God asks to do, and keep marching and keep sharing what God has done for us in our lives and so on, that's our job. Their wall coming down, whenever it is God's responsibility. I'm going to play that little video clip that I played a couple of weeks ago. I'll even put it up on Facebook for some of you seen, so